All right, I think we're live. Um, so we're going to be working on today. We have a real-time analyzer in front of us, along with um, a have a tone generator here, generating a 1 kilohertz tone, 1,000 hertz, 1 kilohertz, 1K. Some people call it. And the idea behind it is this tone going to route it to have a tape plug in here along with a RIA insert, which is actually routing Zulu out. So audio out from the computer into Zulu back to the computer. So right now what we have is um we have what's up, Sirius Quick? Have a we have a tone that is muted at the moment because we don't want to irritate the listeners. But we will unmute it in a moment. The harmonics. What was interesting is one of the users in the tribe the other night actually tried to measure the harmonics generated by Zulu, simulated it with 1 kilohertz tone. So one of the things I wanted to walk through was some of the interesting phenomena you will experience with various settings. So I set up a tone generator. I also have real-time analyzer, a really cool plugin called Vaxingo Span, which is a plugin for 4-bit. Really awesome resolution, allows you to really do a lot of different analysis with your plugins along with your hardware if you're trying to see like does it really add any stuff, even various frequencies, or you can use pink noise, you can use white noise or a tone. But the long story short is that you can actually really get some cool things in front of you to really illustrate what your stuff does with measurement. So what I have in front of us is what we're going to do first is show you I think the plugins probably go. So you guys can message me if the tone is, but right now I have it turned down somewhat. Mixer, I have it down a bit, attenuated about -60, just there on the mix bus. But this is more about measuring the harmonics. So right now we're using ferric TDS, which is a very classic freeware tape plugin. And one of the first things you can see here is, it's got controls like dynamic, saturation, trim, put level, and so on. And what you can do here is, um, actually, I'm going to do soft now. You don't really need to hear the tone. Okay. If I do something interesting with the tone, right now, this is just allowing me to measure. So what you see right off the bat with variety of sound, shout out to Ferric, is that at tone is peaking at -12 dB. And when you simulate this plugin, it instantaneously generates a harmonic finger, as I like to call it, from 1K all the way up to 3K. Basically, the harmonic generation tape plugin starts here. So this is at a third. I guess that's 3 generations, 3 octaves. I don't always have this terminology wrapped around my brain. Sometimes we walk through things, I could always go look things up. But the bottom line is that you're having harmonic generation at -12 dB of a 1 kilohertz tone. You get harmonics at 3K, generate 1K, then reject it. So by contrast, at equal amplitude, right? So this is what the tape plugin is doing. Now the saturation's turned all the way down on this, but this is what you're getting right away. And a lot of times, what's interesting about these plugins is that even when you're sorry, get back to the scope. Even when you're you know you're putting this thing in, you're automatically getting an increased amount of harmonics on very little actual signal injection, but way up here, right? So if you peep this, you got it's not as loud as negative 12 dB. We're not trying to insinuate that, but it's there, right? And it's already in this region of what we call the loudness curve, right? You have a lot of this happening already, um, with very little stimulus happening, right? So even with the saturation turned down, so if I actually give this a little bit more gain on the plugin, I'm going to boost the trim up some. I'm going to get it actually at 0. Okay, that's 0 right there. Okay, and what we're going to see is that the harmonic will change. The amount of harmonic content will change. So again, now we're at 0, and even at negative 51, we have this 3 kilohertz presence there. That again is going to impact our perception of loudness. Now, mind you, this is with the saturation control turned all the way down on this plugin. So what we can do, jump through here real quick. That's the reinsert channel. I'm just going to put the saturation, let's say we'll call it, I don't know, 12 o'clock, right? You already see a decrease in volume. It's interesting. But let's look at the harmonics now. So now you have another harmonic at 5K, right? And you'll peep too that if I go back to this, watch the saturation control and how that affects the volume. So right here, this needle that's aimed at 0, right, has dropped a couple of dB. And that has a lot to do with the fact that these plugins, a lot of the tape plugins out there, they just add volume to your signal to give you the perception of thinking that your music got better sounding, right? And in reality, what they're using is this phenomenon called Fletcher-Munson, which is designed to trick the brain into assuming that anything that gets louder actually has more detail and has improved. That's part of what we call the loudness war in mastering, that anything that's louder sounds better. Give two people two files. Usually the one that's louder is the one that's picked over the other. So what this developer has done very cleverly is made it that when you increase the amount of harmonics in the actual resultant signal, you lower the output volume of the plugin. So as you see, if I continue to increase the saturation knob, you actually will lose very close to 3 dB in signal. And that's to offset the fact that there's some kind of thing going on where they're gain matching and gain increasing the signal so that you can get this harmonic effect, right? So let's go back to the scope. And as you can see, interestingly enough, you still have that big giant dose of 3K, right? So now it is a third of the intensity. According to the decibel system, every time, I believe if something is reduced by 6 dB, it's half in volume. So this is what, 12 to 33, so 12. So this is about roughly maybe 5 to 10% of the volume of the original tone, right? But it's there, okay? And the only other harmonic content you get out of the 1K signal at negative 50 is at negative 54, it's 5K, okay? So let's go examine what happens when we're going to mute this. So now the scope turns off. Nothing is coming in there, right? Let's see what happens when we unmute Zulu. So the settings on here, I don't have a camera on Zulu today. You have to forgive me. But we're at high headroom, 0 clicks of enhance. Bias is set to positive. Deck is set to high. And on the back of Zulu, it's set to HX mode. So the highest fidelity setting you can get out of Zulu before you begin using enhance, basically the gold dot setting. If you're a Zulu user, there's a gold dot on high, gold dot on bias, a gold dot on enhance, a gold dot on headroom. set it to the gold dot, that's my personal preset for all Zulu users so that they can get what I feel is like the coolest version of our high-end Swiss deck, right? So let's unmute Zulu. So I've volume matched the input and output stages. So I have the tone coming in at the same volume into Zulu as on reinsert. You can see that at -12. The volume adjustment thing here is off because I'm only going to use that when we start driving things. Basically, everything is coming in at the same level, and then I've offset the return volume from Zulu to make it the same level coming back so that you get no loss in volume, right? You can get an accurate measurement. I'm going to turn on Zulu. You're not going to hear anything because it's annoying listening to tones all day unless you're not like me. I love listening to tones because you can really hear things happening. You may listen for a little bit. But let's go to span, okay? Now here's something that's amazing right away. So in the highest fidelity setting on Zulu, which is the Swiss deck, based on, you know, tape machines, there's one that rhymes with Uter. We own one, and it was a mastering 2-track, and we also examined some other multi-track head stacks for this particular series. But one of the things that we took away was that after the transfer curve happened on Zulu, if you look at the harmonics here versus the plugin. So if you see here, you have the 1K tone. Now you have 3K, you have 5K. You also have information up here around 7K, information at 9, right? In the highest fidelity setting, there are far more harmonic spawns, you know, regenerations happening up the scale, okay? Now this is at -12 dB. We're not even hitting Zulu. You're already getting harmonic content that adds detail. But the thing you have to remember is the way Zulu was designed, you lose volume. So we don't prey on our users with the Fletcher-Munson curve. We actually take it out of the equation because you lose volume. So automatically, really the dry versus at unequal volume, the dry would sound more detailed and be louder. But then when you put Zulu back to the proper listening volume and proper operating level, Zulu actually has more detail, but it also has retained more punch and dynamic content. So on our high-end mastering deck setting, right, you already have these degrees of harmonic content that really add a good degree of depth to the user's listening experience, right? And we can do things that are really cool here, right? Because the other plugin, I pretty much ran through all the controls. I'm going to do something really fun. I'm going to turn down headroom, right? So we're having it on high deck. Bias is at positive. Enhance is on 0. Headroom is at high. I'm going to turn the headroom down left and right, both at the same time as best I can to pro. Oops, sorry. So that was low and pro, but now we're both on pro. So just changing the headroom of the electronic. Look at that. An instant change in harmonic content has happened that really demonstrates the the difference in harmonic level you can accomplish simply by changing headroom, right? So detail changes, saturation changes just by changing electronic. I'm going to lower it to low now. Remember, this is in the highest fidelity calibration. Down some more. Look at that. Every single octave except for 4K has been occupied by new harmonic content from a 1 kilohertz tone. Look at the proportions of each, right? I'm going to mouse over to some of these. You have 2K at -64 dB versus the -12. You have 3K at -34, so a third of the volume. You have 5K at -48. You have a little bit of 6K at -72. A little bit of 48. A little bit of a little bit of 7K at -48. A little bit of 9K at -63, and so on. Like there's all this information that comes into the picture the more you begin to play with machine electronics. Look at how complex this signal became off of nothing except the 1K tone, right? I go back up in headroom. The harmonics decrease. This is about the cleaner master decks. They were cleaner. There was less saturation. There was less stimulus of the signal. It was designed to preserve what your source sounded like in the first place. It wasn't designed to add. It was made to make it sound like itself, and it's transferred over to the next medium, get it cut to a master at the vinyl factory or at the CD plant or the cassette factory, right? Like there was a method to this madness that really really made a difference, right? Um, Here's another fun thing. Let's change the deck. So now let's go to Pro. So here we are on Pro deck at high headroom, right? So if you're using a Japanese deck like a Otari or a TIAC or some old funky Revox deck, right, or a Tube Telefunken deck, and you decide to use ATR tape, but the deck itself has a ton of tone because it's got tiny peanut-sized transformers. Even at high headroom, but a lower fidelity machine like that has this large proportion of harmonics built into its system, either using crappy op amps that are coupled with, some kind of Darlington pair transistor input with a transformer, or some crazy op amp transformer coupling that was designed to, help reduce broadcast noise, line level noise, because they were using RCA input jacks and didn't want to pick up a lot of ground hum on unbalanced lines. Like, there's all this stuff that comes into play that is part of the old Japanese deck thing that really makes it very desirable for those people that are trying to do old school sounding stuff. They use the old Japanese decks at Daptone. So if you listen to Sharon Jones and Dap, or Amy Winehouse, or any of those artists that have recorded, Mark Ronson, Daptone, they're using these old Tascam and TIAC instead of what you think they would use, right? And it's because they have that sound. And that's at the highest fidelity setting on headroom. So I'm going to turn headroom to Pro. Boom, right? 2K, 3K, 4K, 5K, 6K, 7K, 8K, 9K, 10K. The whole harmonic spectrum immediately has this rich, robust amount of stimulus off a 1 kilohertz tone. Why is 1K important? In most musical instruments, it's present. There's 1K in a kick drum. There's 1K in an 808, right? 1K is one of the most common frequencies that you'll find in all musical instruments, right? And so measuring equipment and how it reacts to this is actually really important, so you know what it's going to add. Like, if you've got a piece of gear and you run 1K into it and nothing happens, that's a really clean piece of gear. But if that gear claims to add harmonic content and claims to add old school vintage tone and so on, you want to really be clear on how, right? Again, we're in the Pro deck setting. These harmonics, they're in these frequency ranges that we care about, right? So you're looking at, it's got less 2K. 2K is a very nasty frequency. A lot of people fight in digital. It's got more 3K, more 5K. This is like the vinyl curve right here. See this? And as you get further up, it starts to decrease in these tingly frequencies, okay? And that is the magic genius of the magnetic tape medium, is that we wouldn't deal with all of this crap that y'all deal with in digital. We didn't have these problems. I was just telling a fellow engineer the other day, he works on really high-end records. I remember when it was volume and EQ, and that was to make a record. Now we do so much work on so many different parts of the spectrum to make it work, versus we just used to create. And the engineers used to just create. We would just do our work and go home. Now you need to be a computer engineer just to make music. Not in a good way either. I don't mean like in the reverent way, like the way I revere those early programmers of the drum machine sampling workstations in the early days of hip hop that were genius. I mean, we have to be computer engineers because we got no way around it. Enter Zulu, right? It eliminates a lot of garbage that you face, right? Because in addition to that, you also have the frequency response piece, have the way it curves, but you can already see here that even though it's generating harmonics, it naturally curtails the frequency response above 2K, starts to slope it down even as it generates harmonics. Things to think about, right? Let's go to low headroom on Pro Deck. Still in HX, right? A lot of complex things are happening that make a big difference to your audio, okay? Go back up to high headroom really quick. we're going to go to low deck. Okay. Low deck, just like pro deck, just like high deck, they're all individual circuits. Everything in Zulu is its own circuit. It's not just a setting. It's literally its own circuit. There are so many different complex circuits living in the box that are independent of each other. They're literally like signal paths. So I can go this way, that way, or this way. Like when you're in Waze and you're trying to figure out the best way to get there, sometimes the hard way is the best way with analog, right? You notice in low deck, it actually generates less harmonics, the same level as high, if I'm not mistaken. Look at that. Look at the high deck. High deck has more harmonics at 3K than the low deck, right? The low deck actually has more information further up. The low deck's very special, okay? These decks had like these really exacerbated screechy highs that if you knew how to work them, they actually sounded cool on certain stuff like rock, like hip hop. They weren't fidelity-based systems, but sometimes you were fighting fidelity. So you needed a machine that could offset that. You know, a slower, long-winded, like a 7.5 IPS, 3.75 IPS. A cassette deck actually might help you in a place that a regular reel-to-reel wouldn't, like a quarter stereo, like an old-school tape deck. So these things made a big difference. So let's get out of high headroom on the low deck. Man, the low deck, dirt box. The minute you get below a certain level, it starts doing stuff that none of the other decks do. It's got a lot of harmonic content. It adds a lot of energy in places that EQs don't and compressors don't. And the dynamic content in the low deck is always far more compressed than the other decks. Let's go to low deck, the low headroom setting on the low deck. Even more harmonic content. Now there's 2K again, right? Super complex, robust signal off one little stimulating piece of information. All it is just a 1K tone. But if you peep it, what's really cool is look at the source signal for 1K. It's dropped in volume, 10 dB, by simply lowering headroom. Let's go back to pro headroom, really close to -18. We go back to the high, and now the overall signal is closer to -12 again. But what's interesting about the low deck, like I said, these decks are all their own independent device. So if you see here, the level is dropped, and they all do things differently. So they're not settings as much as their circuit. I made a deck. Okay. I need to recalibrate the level on this a little bit. I was really rough and ready with my setting. So yeah, I'm off by like -3 dB on the left side. Here we go. All right. So back to our scope. These differences in harmonic content from the different decks are there, right? If I go back to the high deck, right? I just changed the formula, right? There's something happening there that is very slight. This actually, EX mode actually has a compression thing that happens, so kind of mirrors HX in certain ways, but there's a mid-rangey thing. Okay, on here. All right. There's a mid-rangey thing happening that is really important for those of us. Okay, so slight difference. There's a mid-range thing that happens here in 499 that a lot of people dug, along with the compression. And a 1 kilohertz tone won't demonstrate that, but it still has its own particular dead nut in HOFA, but not in the RIA meters. Oh well, guess that's a glitch of theirs. But we can still measure the harmonic content of EX and what happens. So let's see if it's very similar. Not so much. Let's see. Yeah, there's differences there. See, like if you watch up here where my mouse is at, these particular harmonic regions, I'm in HX mode now. Oops. Right? So they drop. And that has a lot to do with the compression that happens in EX mode that doesn't happen, right? So same high deck in EX mode. Harmonics content, is it any different? Yeah. The other thing that's really cool too is that you would think that when you change things like calibration or other settings in Zulu that it would be instantaneous and it would be a very quick kind of change, right? But remember, you're watching something that's a live feedback system work. So when you look at it, watch how the harmonics take a while to register. See that? Look, I'm going to mouse around here. So look where my mouse is at. Look right next to my mouse. Watch that harmonic finger take a while to get back to where it settles. See that? This is supposed to be at the speed of sound, but you can see how like it gradually falls into place. It happens in other places on the scale too. See that? Like down here, the upper right. This is part of the feedback circuitry, is that it isn't meant to be instantaneous because Zulu's actually cycling numerous times in and out inside itself, against itself, to create this complexity. So it isn't just as simple as you just put a transformer in a box with a low pass filter, you made a tape. I wish. I would have been done in 2 weeks instead of 2 years. But instead, there's complexity here, right? So get to know your modes on the back of the deck. Like it's not just there for entertainment value. We're back in high headroom. Let's go to Pro in EX mode. Be complex. Going to mirror everything else. A lot of fun stuff happening here, right? Remember 499 versus ATR, going to be very different in certain ways. The proportion of things, the reactivity, all of that's going to change. Low headroom on EX mode, pretty cool, right? Still a cleaner formula. 499 is plus 9 tape. 9 to be. We're in Pro deck. Low deck in EX mode, still pretty cool. Going to be very curtailed. And that's the calibrations there. And now we get into the areas that are really cool, which is MX and TK, right? So if I go back to high deck, let's go down to MX mode. One click to the left on each. So far, so good, right? Got to drop in signal a little bit. Lower headroom. Pretty cool, right? Go down some more. Magic, right? Lots of content, lots of info. Change the deck. Pro deck's acting pretty different right now. Way less detail. Way less harmonic generation. Pro headroom, a lot more saturation, right? Low headroom, a ton of saturation on the Pro deck. One of my favorite decks of the like, I love high deck, I love low deck a lot, but Pro deck does some really cool stuff because the Japanese systems were just amazing. They had to basically mimic or copy all of the American and German transformer designs they stole during communism and World War II and everything else, and industrial sabotage and espionage and all that jazz. That's for another day. But their copies, because they weren't done exactly the same way and they used lesser materials or different materials, the metallurgy of the transformers was different, along with the practices used to make the machines. They had stuff that sounded cool as hell, right? So let's go back up to high headroom. We'll go to low deck in MX mode. Nothing surprising here. Lots of content happening above the 1K time. Look at that. Pro headroom brings out all the fun stuff. It should mirror. Yeah, I mean, like that's where it's at, folks. Like when you can actually have a machine or a device that actually gives you the harmonic content you need to give you stimulus, right? That's why we stack all these plugins up, because we're just trying to get them to do this the whole time, and they won't. I mean, I've done this very test with a lot of other devices that are digital in the computer, and they all kind of mirror the same concept. The only thing that they really do is make signal louder. They don't actually do anything like this, right? Like, have you ever noticed nobody prides themselves on making old school tape recorder sound from the major companies? Is because it's the hardest thing in the world to do, to make stuff sound bad on purpose. It just is, because those things require very complex approaches, digital algorithms needed to actually mimic those things, the thinking of the engineers, what she's thinking, what he's thinking at the time, to really pull that together. You almost have to be like a record producer that knows how to code, to be honest with you. They're out there, wrong, but the majority of these cats, they're not thinking that way. They're not looking for nostalgia. They're just looking for a quick hit. Sorry, that's the way I look at it. They don't actually give you something that makes it easier for you to get closer to your goal. They actually pull you further away. You don't want brighter, you want warmer. You don't want something that's louder, you want something punchier, right? You want something that sounds more solid, more fulfilled, right? If I run a drum loop through this particular setting right here, you will notice it got changed. It will not be hard for you to hear it, you know, versus you're going to work really hard with a lot of plugins to get them to do anything, or they just sound off. You know, a $15 guitar pedal should not outclass a distortion plugin that costs $2, but a lot of times, it's just the world we live in. We have a problem with acknowledging that old technology is actually in many ways still a valid use, a valid tool to use in a 2020 world. And I don't have a problem with it. I recommend people buy guitar pedals, buy other weird effects units, and so on, because they do the job that they were designed to do, and that's all they have to do. They don't worry about CPU, they don't worry about RAM, they don't worry about hard drive space, they don't worry about an internet connection or an iLock. They just function single end to single end, and that's it. And that's the beauty of designing a piece of equipment versus designing software, is equipment relies only on very short and limited variables, functions. That's it, right? There aren't really many supporting systems that you need to make a tape simulator. There aren't very many supporting systems you rely on to make a compressor. Compressor requires you to plug in signal and get signal, and that's it. And to have those supporting systems in place. But other than that, it's really no different than a headphone jack on a Walkman, you know, like very simple thinking behind it. With software, not so simple. Very much a complicated game, very much a game of averages. And no one really wants to admit that there's limitations to any of this stuff, because that's not going to sell the plugin license, is it? That we can't successfully model this or that because technology hasn't caught up with the demand. That's the way that's the way we get separated from our money a lot. So where are we? We're in MX mode, so Ampex 456. Let's get out of this. Go back to high deck. Let's go down to TK mode. Everybody loves that, right? TK mode's very special, near and dear to me, because that's one of the last things I designed for Zulu. Was the crappiest tape I could find. Hardest thing to pull off. Man, when you heard it, at first we were like, oh man, that sounds terrible. And I was like, wait a minute, we run a drum loop through that. Like, yo, that's my old Porter studio. I was like, this is a mistake, but I'm keeping this. Delays their unit for another 8 months. But you know, the world hates me, but then it comes out, and everybody and their grandmama uses TK mode. So what do you know? Sometimes your best work is at the last minute. It just happens that way, right? Um, so this is high deck in TK mode. I'm just going to turn on the headroom. You already know the drill. Bam, Harmonic City. Different proportions of harmonics, though. Really kind of haphazard, because this is not really a possibility. You can't use a cassette tape on a Studer 810. It just doesn't work that way. But in my world, you can, because I'm bending the rules with you. I'm making it, and that's what happened with the rest of the calibration circuit. I was like, why don't we just make it where any tape is changeable? Turn down the headroom some more on high deck. Still seeing harmonics creep in. Notice this. If you don't let the settings set in, now I sound like church. If you don't let the settings set in, you're not really hearing the full effect. It took about 2 seconds, at least, for all of the harmonic content to fully spawn. So notice that when you change the settings in Zulu, don't jump around so quick. This isn't sample audition time. This is a feedback-based system. So these settings actually take a while to set in. It's not that easy for you to flick it and that's it. Okay? Still at 0 enhanced, by the way. Turn it through the Pro deck. TK mode. Bang. Beautiful. Lots of harmonics. Let's lower the headroom. Woohoo! Look at that. Look at that. It's like trees. You know, like to show the evolution of planet Earth, and trees just come out of the ground, and they're shown in a span of time of a million years. This is the same thing with these harmonics. Like these things, I mean, like they make all the difference in the world. Like when you want fuzz, when you want bass to spank, you know, you crank like 4K in a bass and then you run it into something that's set like this, it's going to come back nasty, gnarly, and have like a lot of like information there in the signal that wasn't present originally, but also it'll sound really cool. Something for y'all to think about when using sampled bass, right? If you have like a bass sample in like a contact library or something like that, it just doesn't have like what you need. Run it through Zulu and Pro Deck, Pro Headroom, and K mode, and offset your volume. EQ into that bad boy, and you will get spanked for days. Real fun stuff. Lowering the headroom again. No surprise. Again, every circuit's a circuit. So if you notice, if I go back here, some stuff goes away. Right? Some of this harmonic content gets thinner and thicker. Right? There's a lot to describe here, but just kind of have to get out of this that each of these settings, I'm going into the low deck now. Each of these settings is like another world of it. That's just the easiest way to explain it. Lowering headroom to Pro from high, low deck, TK mode. Y'all know this setting. You run your kick drums and your snares into low deck, Pro headroom. You run your samples and things like that into this. Sometimes with a splash of enhance. So that's the full walkthrough of all the different settings at 1 kilohertz, right? Zulu. I've changed nothing else. Okay. So here's something that I really thought I should do for y'all, because like, you know, you have a lot of haters out there, people that are critical of this device because they seem to know better than everybody else. So I'm gonna go back to HX mode, high deck, high headroom. I just want you to pay attention to something. So watch this. So Zulu has a 4th position all the way to the right. There's a circle with a slash in it, which is like my version of what I call a bypass. So if you want to turn Zulu's tape feature off, you go to this position. So let's see what happens. Right now we got this going on here. We got some harmonics. We're all the way in HX mode, Captain. Yes, we are. Let's turn it off. Wow. Look at that. So interestingly enough, bypass, if you notice, bypasses a ton of harmonics, right? 8 equal volume. So what does that help us understand? That bypass is kind of a bypass? Yes, it's not a true bypass. You're still running through the transformers in Zulu and all that jazz, but you have bypassed a key piece of the system, which is, if I turn this back on, what do you got? Now, I haven't measured how well bypass works in the other settings for the calibration on the back, so let's go down here. Like it works there, right? You notice that the width of 1K changes a little bit, though. A little bit more distorted. MX mode. Here's EX mode. That's HX mode. But still no harmonics. Turn it back on. High deck. Bam. That's life. Y'all lose. I have a bypass control on Zulu. You just don't want to hear it. Sorry. What else can we do here real quick before we move on to something else? Watch bias. So I have it on high deck, high headroom, HX mode. I'm going to turn bias down. That was the left side, and I'm turning down the right. There's a lot of filtering of harmonic content. All right, let's turn down the headroom. So we're in low, pro, with bias at negative, back at high. Right, turn bias back up. Back on high. Go to pro, headroom, turn bias down. Notice how bias attenuates harmonic content too. Part of what filtering does. Right? Low headroom. You guys are fine. I have a gate, so you study in the background. Turning down bias, you see that the shape of the harmonic fingerprint changes. Amazing, right? Bias, do its thing. Low headroom, low deck. Use bias to turn down the signal. Definitely does things a little differently in each tape calibration. Bias kind of was designed to, work along the concept of how much you really would tweak these machines in nominal situations. So the lower fidelity tape you get, the more bias does. That is kind of like thoughtful design, so to speak. But after years of this being out, you kind of evaluate the choices and you say, yeah, well, maybe I should have made it more aggressive in some ways. But then it's like, this is what the first symphony is all about, right? So that's bias. Bias actually is harmonic content. Isn't that crazy? Look at the difference if you go to like TK mode. Turn bias down. Very aggressive. Right? Very aggressive. Bias is very aggressive. I just increased headroom. Back at pro. Still in low deck, but I'm in. Bias is very aggressive. MX mode, not as much. But still does quite a bit there. Right? Like, there's so many wonderful things that happen. Right? Well, let me just check on YouTube really quick because I wanted to show people that. All right. Let's do enhanced real quick. Always fun times, right? So we're gonna put everything back to usual. Go to HX mode. And just so you know, for those of you that have never used a Zulu in your life, the clicking and clacking that you're hearing is actually the fact that the unit is stepped. Everything on this unit that you're hearing is stepped. So that means that if you set it to Pro and come back 4 days later and the client says, put it back on that mix you had last week, it's stepped. 1% military metal film resistors are used in all of the controls that require volume attenuation. Use very high percentage capacitors, all of the components, and we do everything here in the United States. And we offer step controls on everything that we make. We don't upcharge you for a stepped version, right? Try getting that from some other companies. They'll offer you a $1,500 minimum for a stepped version. Meanwhile, I don't upcharge because that's the least of my worries. The biggest part of my worries is making sure things sound their best. That's why I work the way I work. Anyways, let's go back to enhanced. HX mode, even the back step, which is step. HX mode, bias on positive, enhance on 0, headroom on high. So let's actually watch the harmonic content for 1K. We begin to increase enhance, right? I'm just going to do one click at a time. There's the first click. Fun times, right? Are you noticing that there's a decrease in harmonics? Let's go back. Remember, watch the harmonic fingers here. Enhance is about dialing in dry signal that has a boost of harmonics 4K, but gentle. So, especially in HX mode. Let's check this out. I'm just going to keep going. Very, very close to the original signal. Get all the way to 100%. Back to 0. Stuff. Turn it down to low headroom so you can see a lot of harmonics. Turn enhance up. First click. Next click. $12 o'clock. 1 o'clock. 2 o'clock. 3 o'clock. Look at that. Content different. But notice that if I increase headroom, because that's what I just did, I'm on high now. I'm going to go back to Pro. Still have some harmonic content even at 100% enhanced. Remember, this feedback system, what's on one side is actually feedback. So even though you have the enhanced circuit, it's its own circuit, but I looped it into the tape deck side and vice versa. So what happens is that you still get analog at 100. Noticing how headroom impacts that. The more you increase headroom, less harmonic. This is also going to follow suit with the decks. Even at 100% enhanced, I'm on low headroom, but I'm on Pro deck. I'm getting harmonics content. That's what that feedback is all about. Cool stuff. Or you turn enhance down, start to get harmonic content back. That with headroom or depth. Okay. So that is the general walkthrough of enhanced, deck, headroom, bias. And I just kind of wanted you all to see that. Check and see if y'all have any questions. But he said, let's hear some drums. Of course you did. Let's see. Of course you want to hear drums. So I've turned the tone off. So I have signal at the mixer. What do I got for drums? Oh my goodness. Give me a moment. I'm over here surfing. If I got any drum loops. Okay, let's see. 505. 90 beats a minute. Drum loop. How bad could this possibly be? Great. I don't know if I wanted it to do that though. Sound like can't see anything. Oh, it would help if I actually put this back in the master bus. My bad. Yeah, we're not using that drum loop, y'all. Let's see. Low end hip hop. Let's try this. Drum und bass. No. Ignore slice. Ignore slice. Okay. What do we got here? Yeah. This is what I get for not downloading drum loops for y'all. Funky break. Adjusting. Okay, I guess this is like the struggle DJ Premier beat. Let's see what we get out of this. Snap back on. Get something to happen here. All right. All right. We got here. Well, this is definitely not. Definitely not in tempo. Oh yeah. This is rocking right here. Okay. So here's a quick walkthrough on how I set Zulu. I listen for like where the place is at that I can push it. So usually what I do is I pull the return down. Now, like based on the tape formula, so like let's say we're in the HX mode, right? Matter of fact, we'll go down to MX mode. Stop playing. I'll go to my favorite deck. Go to Pro Deck, Pro Headroom, bias at 100%. I'm just gonna do this thing I call adjusting for the hell of it, right? So what I do is I push the input up until it distorts. Right? Now that's plus 33. Rather impossible. What I try to do is listen in a way that that distortion kind of backs off a little bit. Still at plus 15. So then we play with, does enhance help? So let's do one click of enhance. Yeah, like the sustain changes if I add the enhance. It's kind of cool though. Let's see what we got here. So that's a dry. What happens if you lower headroom? I'm just increase it. Let's go to high. I like pro headroom. Is pro deck really the way to go? Let's try low deck. range headroom, high headroom. Less extreme, let's try it. Lower that headroom. Pro deck, pro headroom. Get the volumes to match. Notice the kick drum. Turn down the headroom. Put bias at 12 o'clock. Softens up. Boost, enhance, one click. Loud. Somebody wants to see it to wave. Let me show you this. I'll put it on the waveform. This is after Zulu. Turn it off. Before Zulu. This is before right here on the screen. So you see the wave? Now after Zulu. Right? Look at that. Let me increase the headroom. Let me turn enhance down. Turn headroom up. Turn enhance off. A little bit more faithful to the original waveform. Still a little bit more even. Let's see the size of the hit, right? Very much squared off. And the lower headroom back to pro. Put on low headroom. Put it back on one click of enhance. Turn bias all the way down. And these are like, you know, a bit extreme for some of these settings. If I just go like out at 0, just offset that volume. Even when you hit it gently, it's still like, yeah, that's nice. Before. So it's not as compressed, but it's still soft. On different volume. So like this is the thing that I mean, in my opinion, the best setting for warmth for drums is kind of like dictated by the drums themselves. So I don't really, I mean, like I said, my favorite setting is Pro Deck. I usually go to Pro Headroom, no enhance. I keep bias usually at 12 o'clock. And then I just kind of gain stage into it. Like I said, I tend to veer on the hot side for tape. So I usually come out around +4. Usually around there. Offset that volume difference. That's really like what I like right there. I mean, like that just takes blah to bang it, right? I mean, even though this isn't the world's greatest drum loop, listen to like the way it shapes the wave and the snare. It's like the snare's dragging across the snare drum. I mean, me personally, let me see if I can find something a little better for y'all to listen to. In the loops library with what I have, I mean, I don't really keep drum loops. I usually make my own. That's really the tricky part. Y'all still studying? Still studying, right? Three trap loops. This sounds like a trap. If I can find okay, I did use this. All right, so let's try it differently. 145. Master. What we got here? Turn the volume up on y'all for no reason. All right. So we're gonna try reset this, and we're gonna see if my old school tape deck works on trap music. Okay. Hey, right. I still got it. I know how to loop stuff. Pull this back up in volume. breaking point is at. Too high. Just because. One click of enhance. Two clicks. Three clicks. One more click. Get that volume right. Off. This gets flat. Put Zulu back in. Turn enhance back. Well, actually, let's turn on headroom. Put it to pro. Like the punch changes up. Turn headroom back up. Like that snare comes forward when you turn headroom up. Let's turn it back to pro. Now it's back some. Turn headroom low. Keep it down lower. Turn down the gain a little bit on the thin. Offset it. Without it. With it. See what we got here. Let's see what we got here. Yeah, little scurvy dogs. Let's see what we got. Try this. All right, just scurvy. Ooh, hey. Looks like Zulu's doing his thing here. Turn it off real quick. It's a cool track too. Scale back on the level. Zulu win. To the top end difference with Zulu without it. Doubt. With Zulu. Listen to the 808. Changes completely. Take Zulu out. Crazy, right? Put Zulu back in. Look, you just gained an octave a low end. Put on low deck. Lower the plus 6. Breaking up a little bit. There's that headroom. Increasing hands. Instead of 6 on the input. Yep. Smooth. Let's see what we got here. Recreate the sound of an old school drum beat. So, you know, because sometimes people want to just make break beats out of like new beats, right? So sometimes that's your challenge. You know, is that like you have these new recordings and hard to get them to turn this back down. I'm gonna recommend that I go to like, I don't know, the crappiest settings I can find. So I'm gonna go to like TK mode, high deck, high headroom. Go in there and just see what happens. But just start there. Let's see what we get. Oh yeah, that's definitely. Oh. Okay. Not exactly what I thought it was. Okay. Find something. Retro disco beat. Any better? Oh yeah, that's okay. Go back to this. We're just gonna peg this bad boy. We're on low headroom, high deck. Excuse me, no enhance, no bias is at positive. Let's go to bias at midnight, 12 o'clock. Automatically you get some buzz. Go to pro headroom on the low, high deck. Noise in the actual sample, that's it. Pro deck. Turn the bias down some more. Turn headroom up. I like it at pro. Do low deck. It's almost like it's been bit reduced by the low headroom, low deck setting. Okay. That pro deck. To the top end. Dry. Put it back on Zulu. All that crap is gone. Turn bias back up some. I said there's noise in the file. Nothing you can really do about that. Yeah. Get something real quick. See if we can get something a little bit more what we were looking for here. Sorry for the delay. Good. Sounds like a Prince record is about to drop, right? Okay, let's drop this in here and see what happens. Interesting. Okay, so this might show some promise, this library here. This is acoustic drum loops, by the way. StayOnBeat.com. Yeah, brother. Might be more of what I've been looking for. I wanted some more okay. Getting there. It's also a great way to audition samples. You know, because you don't want to like know what stuff sounds like dry. Wow, that's a peg. Interesting. Okay. Imagine without the top end. Just. Getting closer. That's a good loop. Okay, so I'll work with that. Only because I know the value of that. That's kind of like an alternative kind of rock shuffly kind of thing, but there's some value to those loops sometimes. Type of producing. If you're doing like an alt kind of Kanye West kind of thing or so on, a lot of times that stuff comes. Get some level. Look how bright that is. All right. Woo. Pull this back up. Way better than Zulu. Change the deck up. Put high headroom on the low deck. Look how bright and dry is. Turn this return down some. See if we can cook it a little. Sometimes distortion is what makes the drum loop really like sound its best. A lot of times stuff that's hidden in your formulas is because you didn't use enough volume to hit it right. Look at that. Get it up to level. Dry. Zulu. High deck, low headroom. Bias at 12 o'clock. No one hand. Turn the headroom down. Bass fronts. Turn the headroom down some more. Turn deck up with low headroom to pro. High deck. Pro headroom. Turn that bias down to 9 o'clock. All the way down. Headroom all the way up. Turn bias up. Bias up some more. A little bit more bias. One click before 12 o'clock. 12 o'clock. Headroom all the way down. Pro deck. Low deck. Pro head drum. One click of enhance. Low headroom. Switch from TK to MX. 456, baby. Pro headroom. Turn that bias down. Turn the headroom down. Pro deck, low headroom. High deck, low headroom. EX mode. Turn the bias back up. Pro headroom, high deck. Punchy. Dry. Zulu. Pull down the volume a little bit. Dry. Zulu. Slow this down. All right. Ew, that's my fun. I'm actually going to wrap this up. So thank you for watching. I hope you learned a lot out of this. And I appreciate your time. And I wish you well. Till next time.